Now, Eyewitness Sports.
All right, welcome to Double OT. Maury, Hirsch, Gordon, and I doing a little remote session here. Maury's at his palatial Providence apartment. I'm in our sports office. How's the didn't shave today? You got the quarantine going? What you got
Quarantine has been brutal as expected. But we're hoping to be back soon.
All right, obviously we're going to react to the Tom Brady news for the next while here. We'll start with this. We've been speculating for this for a year, specifically the last 2 months. But wasn't it still a little bit of a shock when you picked up your phone on Tuesday morning and saw it?
Oh, it was. I mean, Tom Brady to the Bucs is as shocking as it was going to be.
Well, even pre-Bucs, just knowing that he was leaving, and he put out the statement, like when you just read that
on Tuesday. Yeah, it was completely shocking, and I know I'll stand by it. I was all for him coming back. Mm-hmm. I was all for him. I was saying, there was no chance in hell he was going to don another jersey, play for a different organization. But yeah, until you see it in writing, you see the thank you, you see kind of the heartfelt letter that he wrote to the Patriots fans. I think, it was shocking. And then to see, the transition into the Bucs, just an organization that hasn't made the playoffs in almost, 2 decades, and, an organization that nobody really pays attention to, it was all shocking.
Yeah, it appeared in the days leading up to it that this was going to be the outcome. And you had people like Jeff Darlington and Tommy Curran even alluding to it subtly that this could happen. But, at the end of the day, I think all of us were like, yeah, but if Tampa's the only option, or even the Chargers, he has to come back to the Patriots, right? So shock isn't the word, because I think we knew it was possible, but just sort of stunned that after all the speculation, he was leaving. And I sort of had a feeling this is how it would go in terms of he would announce he's leaving. There'd be, 24 hours, or in this case less than that, and then he's going elsewhere. So I think once the Brady camp realized he had a market, and maybe the market was just Tampa and the Chargers, he could do this. And that gets us to the question of why did it get to this point? And I, like, people from outside of New England who haven't been following it as closely are like, why is Brady leaving? It's not pushed out the door. The door was left open for him to walk out, because it appears the Patriots didn't even really engage him with a serious offer. If
Right.
Brady wanted to come back to them with his tail between his legs and say, hey, all right, I want to come back, pay me only 15 or 20 because I have the 13.5 million cap hit, I think they would have taken him back. But when they weren't competing with years and money with the likes of the Bucs, they didn't even really negotiate with him. So at that point, I think Brady was like, all right, I'm out of here.
I know it kind of seems a little far-fetched, but within the last week or two, as the coronavirus craze, I guess, kept getting, more and more engulfing, and the NBA cancels its season and the NHL cancels its season, I thought that maybe that would play a potential factor in Brady not having the time to gain a rapport with new receivers, go to a new team, meet them in person. It sounds like he's not even going to have an introductory press conference in Tampa Bay. But yeah, I mean, it was completely shocking. And I think, I think you can trace it back to August that, he kind of had his mind made up, or at least started to make it up. And then we just didn't follow the trail of, selling the house and moving to Connecticut and moving on to Massachusetts.
I went through our Double OT timeline, and it was like, why is he selling his house? Why is Brady moody? And it's like, now looking back, it's like all the tea leaves are there. But I do believe, Maury, that he went into free agency still open-minded. I think if Bill was able to put his ego aside, or maybe his GM had aside, and realizing it's not great business to give a long-term contract to a 43-year-old, and Bill was like, hey, Tom, forget about the last couple of years. We want you here for 2 years guaranteed, $50 million. I think Tom would have came back. I mean, I don't think he wants to go to Tampa.
No.
And a lot of people are saying the proximity to New York because his son's Jack is there. They have a talented roster, but I'm sure all of us a month ago, even a week ago, when people were talking about Tampa was being serious, I remember saying on the news desk, if Tom Brady wants to wear that ugly uniform and go to a pirate ship in Tampa, so be it. But I think at the end of the day, Belichick, he didn't extend Tom the last couple of years, so he wasn't going to do it now. This was the end of the road. he has an uncanny ability to be unemotional or emotionless with his players, even the greatest of all time. Whereas 99% of people in business would sort of give him the thank you contract for all that you've done. We know you don't really deserve this, but we owe it to you. And Belichick just doesn't operate like that.
But don't you think he does deserve it?
Yes.
We all think he deserves it. Like at some point, what's an extra 5 or 7 million? We see already with the reports with the Bucks, it's like all these players are calling the Bucks to see if they can have an opportunity to go play for that team. That's the way that the Patriots have operated. So if you do spill $5 or $10 more million than you wanted, you know that you're going to get guys that are going to come in on veteran minimums and players that are going to want to play with Brady. So I think you could have relied on that a little bit more. And I'm not saying Bill should have given him 3 years and 90 million or some absurd number that we know he wasn't going to go to. But if Bill extended himself maybe just a little bit, I think this all ends a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think this was avoidable. I think he could have stayed. And I think, listen, if Brady came back, I don't think they were good enough to beat the Ravens or Chiefs. They were a 12-4 team last year that wasn't as good as their record. We saw them lose to the Titans. In some ways, I think it's smart to sort of let Brady leave, regroup. I don't want to use the term rebuild, but in some respects it is because Tom Brady's out the door. And they still, without Brady, don't have a ton of money right now.
Right.
Shedding a guy like Daron Harmon for $4 million, I mean, they're sort of trying to scrounge up all the change in the sofa cushions right now to have enough money to make a deal or to what have you. So so that leads me to the next question. More pressure right now, Belichick or Brady?
I think it's got to be Brady. I think because he chose to walk out the door and he chose not to re-sign. I think if he can go, take a mediocre Bucks team to the playoffs, and I think, we'll get into our projections later, but I definitely think he's got a playoff roster now in his hands in Tampa. I think it's going to be more on Brady. Either if he was going to Tampa Bay, he's going to have to face Drew Brees twice a year in the regular season, plus a decent Carolina Panthers team and a Falcons team that seems to pop up here and then. Or if he goes to the Chargers, he was going to have to face a Mahomes. So all the pressure was going to be on Brady. He's kind of making the bed for himself right now. He's saying, listen, I want to leave New England. I want to leave the comfort, of a franchise where I've been for 20 years and have 6 Super Bowls and have been to 9. I want a chance to now go prove everybody something. I think Belichick, it's more, he's still with the dynasty. I think he has a system in place. They're still the odds-on favorite now. I don't think you can appoint the Jets or the Dolphins or the Bills. Despite all the moves they've made in free agency, I don't think you can say that they're now the favorites. So I think because when you come back to it, that the Patriots are the favorite in the East, I think if Brady can take a team that was under 500 and make a serious run, I think, he'll prove everybody wrong, and why he left.
I think there's more. I completely disagree. I think there's more pressure on Belichick, but I do think Brady. I just want to be clear. I don't think Brady he left. Yes, but he was gently pushed out. I think he would have stayed. So I actually think, you notice how there's no like vitriol with Patriot fans burning the Brady jerseys. I think everyone sort of understands that, like, if Belichick and co wanted him back, he would have stayed. So I actually think him going to Tampa, in some respects, there isn't a lot of pressure. They were 7-9. If he gets them to 10 or 11 wins and makes the playoffs, I think that's fine. But I don't know if anyone's expecting him to get to the Super Bowl with Tampa. Whereas with Belichick, the question has always been, because of his very average record with Cleveland in the 90s, and the year 2000, they didn't make the playoffs prior to Brady taking over in 2001. What is Belichick without Brady? And everyone points to 2008. They won 11 games without him and Matt Castle, but that team was a year removed from a perfect season. And then they went 3-1 during the Brady suspension in 2016. But that was also a loaded roster, and they had Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think Belichick needs to prove, I am the greatest coach of all time, and I don't have the security blanket of Tom Brady. So, like, my roster isn't that, the Patriots roster isn't that great. And I don't think historically it's been that great, but Tom Brady is such a Band-Aid to all your ills because he's such a good player. So if you don't have the best receivers or the best defense, there were years the Patriots had brutal defenses, like in 2011 when they went to the Super Bowl, and Brady just masks it. So if you take out Brady and put an average quarterback, what are the Patriots now? And I do think, Maury, we spend time with Belichick every week at his press conferences. If they're 2-4 or 3-5 and he's getting surly with the media and the Pats are struggling, I'm not going to say Pats fans are going to turn on him, but they're not going to take, the Belichick persona as well as they did when they were winning.
No, for sure. I think just to kind of play devil's advocate, I think the reason, again, why I think a little bit more pressure is on Brady is because when we look at the landscape of the NFL, all the top teams were in the AFC. It was the Patriots with Brady, and then it was the Ravens and the Chiefs. Those were kind of your Super Bowl favorites, the teams that Chiefs obviously ended up winning the Super Bowl. You go to the NFC, okay, you had a Rams team that had a flash in the pan type of season. They got to the Super Bowl, were supposed to be this great offense, scored 3 points. The 49ers were this flash in the pan team, had a really good season, and then just kind of stunk in the Super Bowl. The Packers, they're okay with a fading Rodgers. And you look at the Saints, who have lost the last couple of years in the playoffs. So I think the NFC landscape is a little easier to maybe make a run.
I agree there.
Rather than in the AFC where it's like, okay, and everybody's falling in love with the Titans as well. Everyone's like, okay, the Titans could go beat the Chiefs and go to the Super Bowl this year. So I think with the Ravens, the Chiefs, and then potentially sliding the Titans in, there's a little bit more talent in the AFC. It's harder maybe for Bill to get through without Tom now, where Tom goes to the easier conference to navigate through.
Yeah, I think the AFC is more top heavy. I think Baltimore, KC are really good. Tennessee, we'll see, very good. The good thing I think for Brady and the Pats this year is the 7 playoff teams, more margin for error. If the Pats squeeze in with Stidham or whoever at quarterback at 9-7, I think Patriot fans will take that. I think if you could squeeze in, maybe win a playoff game in the transition year, that's not the end of the world. But you're right. Other than we saw what the Rams were 2 years ago and then the Niners last year, maybe the Niners' fault. Like, we don't know. The NFC is so inconsistent. You generally have the Saints and Packers and Seahawks and those teams in it every year. But I agree. I mean, there's no reason to believe Brady and the Bucs can't get to, like, the divisional round.
Sure.
Let's project our records for them. Where do you have the Pats and the Bucs this year?
Yeah. So knowing kind of who the Patriots are going to play, the NFC West, which looks to be a pretty good division this year, I think, the Patriots are going to be around a 10-win team. I think we still have to kind of see what plays out the rest of free agency. And as we always like to say here, it's Thursday evening at 5:20 on the East. But, if they can get, a tight end or another wide receiver in tow and they have a decent quarterback, under center, I think this is a team that can still win 9 or 10 games. I think it's going to be hard, to convince me that the Patriots won't win 4 games, maybe 5 in the division. This year, I think the Jets are still going to jet it up. And the Dolphins, you can definitely win at least one of those games. So I think, they're going to be around a 9 or a 10-win team. As for the Bucs, I don't know exactly who's on their schedule, but a 7-9 team, you add Tom Brady, you think you can flip that, 3 wins at least, and 10-6 with the expanded playoff format, I think definitely gets you into the playoffs. So I think they both could end up maybe with the same record. But then in terms of optimism heading into the playoffs, you're obviously going to take a Tom Brady-led team over a Patriots team without Tom Brady.
I have the Patriots 9-7, losing the division to the Bills. I think the Bills get to 10-6 and win it. Bills were right there in December with the Patriots last year. This is, on March, whatever today's date is, 19th, not knowing who the Patriots starter is next year. I think Belichick, even with average quarterback, whoever it is good enough at his job. And the defense, while losing a lot of key players like a Van Noy, a Collins, can still be good enough where they can win those 20-17 games, 23-20. But because their schedule's hard, I'm going to say they go 9-7. And then I have the Bucs, like you said, 10-6. Other than the Saints, I'm not that high on Carolina, and the Falcons were bad last year, so I think they can sort of beat up the division. And I think both Brady and Belichick are going to have a fire under their rear ends this year because everyone's always wondered what's one going to do without the other. And it'll be interesting to see if Brady shows up to OTAs if they have them. This may be good for Brady, the sabbatical with OTAs because of the coronavirus. I wonder if he would have gone. But you made a good point at the top of the show, which is building rapport. I think Tampa Bay is going to really have to have a simple offense this first year. Realize you have good talent, because if Brady's going to do to Godwin and Mike Evans what he did with N'Keal Harry and not really welcome them with open arms, I think they'll have issues. But all right, so we agree about 9-7, 10-6. Let's project Patriot quarterback. I guess I'll start. It seems like they like Jarrett Stidham. Everyone, all the beat guys are like, oh, he was great in preseason. I was going through his stuff last night. He had some good throws in the Giants and the Panthers preseason game. People say he's a strong arm. I like him. I think I've only had a couple exchanges with him, but I think he's mature. He gets it. I think was married at the age of like 22. So he's not one of those guys who's not going to be all in. It seems like he has a right head on his shoulders. So let's say it's Jarrett Stidham. I think he'll be fine. He'll have some growing pains. I think ideally you'd rather have him maybe in a Belichick McDaniel system 2 years under his belt before he gets thrown in there. But my assumption is they'll bring in a veteran through free agency, let's say a Jacoby Brissett, and then maybe they draft someone. I think there'll be a legitimate quarterback competition in camp, whether it's 3 guys, and maybe the veteran beats Stidham and Stidham replaces him midway through the season. But I think Cam Newton is out of question. I don't know at 23 their pick if Justin Herbert's there, or I'm not a big draft guru. If they want to parlay some picks, move up if Belichick really likes someone. But if they like Stidham, I find it hard to believe that they'd move up and try to get and reach for someone outside of the Burrows and Tuas and the top 10 guys.
Yeah, I think the odds-on favorite right now has to be Jarrett Stidham. But in terms of kind of veteran leadership, Cam Newton might get released, according to reports, similar to a Todd Gurley. I think, depending on egos and depending on, if he wants to take a backup role, I think Cam Newton, potentially could be a good fit. Same with like Andy Dalton. I've always been
Newton. Do you think he would fit in culturally?
I think he would. I think everybody falls in line with Belichick, similar to the Brady mentality. I think you bring in some of these personalities that haven't necessarily fit well in other places, or they've made their mark in other places nationally for things they've said in the media. I think Bill Belichick will be able to keep those personalities in check. So I like either one of those two in terms of Andy Dalton or Cam Newton. I think it's going to be important to bring in a veteran backup who will be able to, continue to teach Jarrett Stidham. I don't want to, say, okay, if Jarrett Stidham starts week 1, the guy still has a lot of learning. And like you mentioned, I think it would be good to keep him in the system for maybe 2 years before he starts. But at this point, if they like him and he's shown some promise, why not kind of throw him into the fire and see what he's made of? He's built a rapport with N'Keal Harry. He's built a rapport with some of these other receivers. He obviously got a lot of the reps in training camp last year. I think it's smart, though, to grab a veteran, whether it's a Jacoby Brissett, kind of a second-tier veteran.
Or maybe even
I think that's important.
Maybe even bring Hoyer's actually making good money, but Hoyer and Stidham were both in camp last year before Hoyer got cut. So you bring Hoyer in with the understanding, hey, you're the mentor. This isn't going to be your job. But how do you sort of sell that to Brian Hoyer? But what is he, third now behind Brissett and Rivers and Indy?
Right.
So maybe he comes back, takes $1 million a year, and is sort of a mentor. I wouldn't hate that. I don't want to eat up the good thing about Stidham is he's making under $1 million, so that frees up a lot of money. So I sort of like the idea of not paying anyone at quarterback and resetting your roster around you. And the last topic I want to get to is Van Noy out the door, Jamie Collins, Ted Karras, your boy Landon Roberts. Who am I missing here? Duron Harmon.
Right.
And someone just made a good point on Twitter too. It's like we're overreacting in the wake of Brady. But if you go back every offseason, every team loses 5 or 6 guys. And you're like, oh, right. It's easy. And the Patriots generally aren't big spenders the first day or two of free agency. Belichick lets everyone run wild and then settles down and then gets a lot of guys for $1, $2, $3, $4 million a year. So I'm not freaking out a whole lot. I think we all knew Jamie Collins and Van Noy were out the door. They pounced on McCourty, which I think was smart because my big issue, Maury, for Belichick is part of the reason the so-called Patriot way works is because these rookies and veterans come in here and they're like, oh my God, Belichick treats Tom Brady, the GOAT, the same as the 53rd guy on the roster. No special treatment here. I better fall in line. Belichick needs guys like McCourty and Slater around, because if his message isn't getting to someone, he needs guys to reinforce it. Without Tom Brady being here, you sort of lose a little bit of the mystique and cachet and buy-in, I think, from the Patriots. So I think he needs to maintain the culture right now. And my other worry is the guys that would come here, the Van Noys, the Chris Longs, veterans who came here, didn't make a lot of money, but then won a ring, got paid elsewhere. I don't know if you're going to get as many of those guys because it's not built up where you're Super Bowl or bust every year right now. So
Right.
I'm a little worried about the roster. They've had some poor drafts the last couple of years, so I think he needs to really hit on the drafts and in free agency.
Yeah, I think a couple guys, as you mentioned, free agency. One has to be Eric Ebron. I think, he had a great game, the Thursday night game in New England a couple of years ago. I think he's a big tight end who has good hands. The knock on him is that he can't really block. I think some of the experts were saying, he's a little bit better of a blocker than when you watch him back on film than maybe what, people say about him. But I think he would be a good start. A guy like Robbie Anderson as well. I think he's an upgrade from a Philip Dorsett. He's got a little bit more size, the same type of burner as him. But I think if you can get a couple weapons on the outside, I think this defense is still a top 10 defense. A special teams with Bill Belichick will always be run well and will always be a top special teams. SG3 is coming back next year after his injury. So I think
can't
there
believe
are pieces in
Ebner's
place.
gone. I mean, Bill's losing his way when his special teams boys are leaving. Nate Ebner.
Yeah, Ebner, exactly, Ebner and Roberts. But no, I think if they can address some things on offense, the same questions we had last year, just an outside threat or two, and they can shore up the quarterback position, then I think they're fine. Special teams will be fine. Defense will be fine. I like the new guy they got, Bo Allen, who's pretty good with the Eagles.
Yeah, but
he
seems like a character too, huh?
He is. But I think he's going to be like a Danny Shelton. Like, you're not really going to know his name, but he's going to do the job.
Yeah. I will say this too. Something crazy about buzz factor is the Pats' buzz was Brady. They'll still be on a lot of national televised games, but now Tampa Bay with Brady is a bigger draw for the networks than the Patriots. If they're showing the marquee right now, who's on the marquee? Stephon Gilmore? Like, if it's Patriots Packers, Rodgers, Gilmore,
right?
You know what I mean, or McCourty. So it'll be weird being I don't want to say an also ran, but just another NFL more one than we're used to the crazy Thursday and Sunday night and Monday night games. But it's going to be interesting. Our worlds, our jobs covering a team that's not picked to go to the Super Bowl every year. In some ways, I think it'll be interesting and different for us. It got to the point, over the last 7 years where it's like the season started division round of the playoffs because you knew they were winning the division, they were getting a bye. And with Buffalo being good, it's going to be a dogfight in the AFC East. So interesting times for the Patriots, to say the least.
Definitely. And I think, obviously, with Brady out the door, the Patriots aren't going to be such a shoo-in every week on New England Nation. Every time when we make our game picks, you always want to pick the opposition. You want to pick the Chiefs, or you want to pick, the other top team in the AFC that the Patriots are picking. You always come back to the Patriots. It's
right.
Like, how about picking another team for once? But it's definitely going to be an interesting season coming up, and I guess we've got the draft coming up in a couple weeks now.
Yeah, in about a month, April 23rd or whatever that's going to be. That may be the first time we actually hear from the Pats. They usually give us some veterans in March and April, but with the coronavirus, I was emailing with one of the PR guys during the Brady news, and I was like, "Oh, can I come in the workroom?" And he's like, "ESPN's NFL Network are in here," and that's it because they're 6 feet apart and the room isn't that big.
Right.
So, geez, you're right. So yeah, it'll be interesting times. Day 4 or 5 here after Brady, day 3. So it's gonna be an interesting offseason and a good season coming up. All right, we'll try to do another one of these pretty soon, but that'll wrap it up.